Greetings and salutations, folks. I hope everyone is still doing well. Welcome to tonight's second bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They all were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter, and they are appreciated. And with that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to this second bonus upload of the evening, shall we? Alright guys, really quick, I want to start the day off talking about one of my favorite books. I talk about this book almost every day in every upload because it is amazing. I'm not going to get into it today, but a subscriber had sent me an email saying, Jeff, how factual is the skinwalkers at the Pentagon? And I said, myself, I believe everything in that book. I don't believe that there is anything fictional about this. I think it's fact. And page 1 says it all. Department of Defense, Defense Office of Pre-Publication and Security Review. Case number, cleared for public release, May 11th, 2021. The views expressed in this publication are those of the author and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the Department of Defense or the United States government. The public release clearance of this publication by the Department of Defense does not imply Department of Defense endorsement or factual accuracy of the material. Where appropriate, in order to protect personally identifiable information and protected health information, names and personal details have been changed. So what that means is, just like a book that, like an autobiography about JFK, or, you know, any kind of book that is written by a government official or or is written depicting a government official. So if I was a government official and I wrote a book, it would have to be looked at for clearance. Or if I was writing a book about JFK or anything of national security, it would have to go through them. So therefore, just that little bit tells me a lot. You don't submit a fictional work to the Department of Defense. You just don't do it. And if you think you do, you're sadly mistaken. So yeah, I truly believe that these gentlemen did their research, experienced everything that they're talking about in this book from 2009 to 2021 when the book came out. So yeah, and if you really haven't gotten a chance to read the book, I can't say enough about it. It's like this. These two books are on my desk at all times. Them and Us by Danny Van Drimeny, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon Then you got Behold the Pale Horse and a couple of other books. Those 3 books are, if I didn't have, or if I could only have a couple of books, those 3 would be the first 3 that I would pick. So now let's get into today's first order of business. Just recently, I shared a friend of the channel's and a friend of mine, their experience, and I made the statement that I don't think he will ever come back on and share the information that freaked him out. I'm talking about Brad. I did, when I met Brad, I did the first upload called Brad's Redemption, where I had Brad on the show and I let him share his experiences with 0 judgment. And I think that's how it should always be. Brad had shared his experience somewhere else. Got a lot of flack for shooting a Dogman. And, you know, things happen. Then Brad shared his angel experience or a Palladian or Nordic alien experience hunting a Dogman. One of these angelic, like aliens, was hunting down a Dogman. Or it could have been an angel. We actually talked about it last night, and he said, I don't know if it is an angel, to be honest with you. And he is very religious. He is very, very religious. So for him to say that really is kind of interesting for me, because, you know, I always thought he thought it was an angel. But now that he said that, I'm like, maybe it was a Nordic. And maybe like the Anunnaki and Sumerian texts say, there was a dog-headed race of alien that were violent, and they did war with other races of alien on this planet, including the Tarians, the Reptilians. But Brad reached out and he had an encounter a couple days ago. And this is not the one that freaked him out the most. I don't even know that one. But I'm going to share this, and then I'm going to talk to Brad sometime today. Hopefully we can get him on the show. I was supposed to actually have DJ's interview today, but we didn't connect yesterday or last night. So hopefully we'll connect this week, because I want to hear what he's got to say as well. But let's get into Brad's experience. Jeff, on May 17th of this year, last Friday, I went up to the area north of Flagstaff, where I had been many times since that last time I had an encounter. The very area where I saw that man, or angel, or Nordic, and the Dogman fight. I've been to this area at least a dozen times in the last 18 months, each time by myself. I've been practicing carrying heavy weights, different packs, different guns, different equipment, different gear. I've been increasing my weight each time until now. I'm regularly carrying a 60-pound pack. This is not including my rifle, 3 handguns, and corresponding ammo. I've also been increasing my distance each time to where, on this last trip, I was doing 12-mile hike. 6 miles out, 6 miles back, carrying approximately 60 pounds of equipment and gear. I've been doing this for 2 reasons: to lose weight and to get into better shape, and to prepare for what may be coming in the near future. So Jeff, let me state here and now, because of what happened, I will never go back into any forest ever again, armed or unarmed. I have never been so scared in my life, both with what happened during the encounter and what happened after. I'm forgetting to walk or hike in the forest in any capacity from now on. I will limit my hiking to town or public trails, and I will begin playing golf again to take place of my forest excursions. Jeff, you know what I've been through better than anyone, and I can tell you I will never go into the woods or forest again. So last Friday, I decided to go up to my spot that I have been going to for almost 2 years. The spot is approximately 7 to 8 miles north of Flagstaff and several miles east of 89. It is a forested area, but not thick or dense forest like back east. I left my home at around 8 in the morning and drove an hour or so to get to my spot. As I already stated, I was carrying about 60 pounds of gear: binoculars, water, food, 2 bricks per weight, 3 holsters, a thigh rig with a 6-inch 686 plus 357 in it, a shoulder holster carrying a 4-inch 686 plus 357 mag, a ankle holster carrying a Colt King Cobra 2-inch, also a 357 Magnum. I was also carrying an old 1903 A3 bolt-action rifle from World War II in .30-06. Although it is in pristine condition, it proved itself exceedingly. I was also carrying 26 rounds of .30-06 ammo for the rifle and nearly 100 rounds of .357 ammo for the revolvers. I had a 10-inch Bowie knife, a canteen, a flashlight, and other small assorted gear. I'm not telling you all of this to impress you or anyone else for that matter, but to impress upon you how well equipped I was and how weighed down I was. But this was entirely on purpose for the reasons I had already given. I was not intending to see anything or encounter anything, as I had been to this area since my last encounter no less than a dozen times, and not seeing anything larger than a coyote. It was a warm day in the low 80s with no wind and blue skies. I was wearing brown slacks, tan polo, and a dark green windbreaker, tan color Under Armour tactical boots. I wasn't wearing anything camo, but my colors blended in fairly well with the terrain. The windbreaker was to cover my shoulder holster. With that covered, I looked pretty much like a regular hunter, although to anyone with a keen eye, I had already too much gear on. Again, it was about weight and what I would be able to carry if heading into combat, or at least weight-wise. I parked my car down the road a bit and decided to enter the forest, about a half a mile from where my car was. In other words, I parked along 89 and walked north, another half mile north, before turning east into the forest. This will be important later. I set my pedometer so that I would know when I got to 6 miles due east so that I could turn around and walk back the same way I had come. I had a compass but no GPS. I know how to read a compass. But I still get nervous the further I get out from the highway. I was trying to remain exactly due east from the spot I entered the forest and return exactly due west. This will make a little more difficult for me to get lost, which I am terrified of doing. As you know, I am not a hunter or a woodsman, so I am extremely proud of myself for going so far into the deep forest alone on many different occasions. That will no longer be the case, okay? I needed to give you this context of this. My last encounter as I entered the forest, I was trying to get accustomed to the weight and the chafing that you inevitably have to deal with when carrying so much weight. But after about a half a mile or so, I got into the rhythm and everything kind of fell into place. Other than my shoulders hurting from the weight of the pack, I was feeling pretty good. When I got to the 3-mile point, I stopped and drank some water. Had 2 power bars as I hadn't eaten anything yet that day and it was approaching 10:30 a.m. Took my pack off, sat down for about a half an hour. Jeff, the beauty of this place and the stillness is truly intoxicating. I found myself wanting to take a nap there, and I easily could have. At about 11 a.m., or shortly before, I put my pack back on, retightened my boots, slung my O3 over my shoulder, and began walking again. I was averaging about 3 miles per hour, and when you consider the terrain and weight I was carrying, that's pretty damn good. Having said that, my time slowed considerably over the next couple of miles. So much so that by the time I got to the 5-mile point, a mile from the turnaround point, it was almost 1 p.m. My shoulders were hurting, so I decided to stop at that point because it was up on a bit of a hill overlooking a very shallow valley. So shallow, in fact, that it wasn't more than 20 feet below the little hill I was on, and the descent was very gradual. I was still ahead of schedule meaning making my way back to the car before dark, 7:30. So I decided to pull out my binoculars and look across this little valley, which was no more than 1,000 yards wide. On the other side, where there are hills with what look like boulders and fallen trees and what appeared to be cave openings. I don't know that for sure because I never made it across the valley to find out. As I was looking across the valley, I noticed 3 large dogs on all 4s, but because of their size, I immediately knew what I was looking at. After all, there are no wolves in Arizona, as far as I know anyway. They were all running around a tree, and what looked like to me, playfully looking for something. Now, for perspective, I was about a half a mile or 2/3 of a mile away from them at this point. I know they hadn't seen, heard, or smelled me at this point, especially since the slight breeze was coming towards me. I stopped and watched them for a good couple of minutes and noticed they were each beginning to stand up and sniff the air, then return to playing around the tree. I had a decision to make. I could easily turn around and cut 2 miles off of my hike, returning the same way I came, with very little risk they would even know I was there. This was appealing because my shoulders and feet were starting to hurt, or I could see if I could sneak closer and get some good pictures. I have been warned at least twice, and most probably 3 times, about doing such things, but I felt looking at the terrain that I could get within 100 yards or so without being noticed and get some great photos of these hybrid creatures and settle the argument once and for all. So, regrettably, I did. I put all my gear away except for my binoculars, which I had left on my neck, and I proceeded down the decline after checking one more time to see that the 3 animals were still there. And they were. I knew they would be out of sight as I descended, so I wanted to make sure I saw where they were in relation to my position. This would make it easier to approach them from the right area and at what point I needed to start looking for them again. I moved through the valley as quietly as I could, stopping every few trees to listen and see if I noticed any movement. The closer I got, the worse this decision to approach felt. I could just sense that I was either being watched or at least they had smelled me. So bad was this feeling that as I got about halfway through the valley, I stopped and brought up the O3 off my rifle. I didn't need to work the bolt chamber. A round had already been done that when I started down into the valley, and I had all full 6 rounds of the 30-06 ready to go. Into firing position, I thought about taking my pack off to be more mobile and a little more quiet, but the thought of being chased out of there and having to leave all the equipment just didn't sit right with me, so I pressed on. I know someone is going to say, who cares about the equipment? And to that I would say, I don't buy junk, and all my stuff is name brand and expensive, so leaving it or coming back for it is not an option. When I got about 200 yards from the far side of the valley, I could clearly see the upslope of the valley, and just beyond that, the hill that I had seen these creatures on. I noticed two things. One, the animals were no longer where I had seen them, and two, the forest had gone completely silent. I have enough experience with these creatures to know that I was in trouble. I began to think myself, you idiot. There were 3 of them, and now you are less than 200 yards from where they were, and you don't know where any of them are. I stopped, took a series of deep breaths, thought about my situation and what I should do. For some reason, I thought when I had left the other side of the valley that these creatures would be in the same position, or at least close to it. When I realized the danger I was in, I immediately put away the childish, ridiculous idea about photographing these things and started backing away from the upslope of the far side of the valley. I suddenly stopped after a few strides, put my rifle down, and brought up my binoculars to my eyes with the hope that I could look in all directions and see nothing looking back. A moment of hope ran through my mind that maybe they had run off in some other direction, and I could make better time back through the valley, which would require me to make some noise. However, if they had indeed left the area completely, I could basically start jogging back through the forest, regardless of the noise. After looking around in every direction, I saw no evidence of these creatures. I took a deep breath, trying to relax, picked up my rifle, and began walking briskly back the way I had come. It was now 2 p.m. or close to it. I got back to the halfway point of the valley when I noticed off to my left a slight movement. I turned to look, rifle at the ready, and to my horror, there was one of the 3, or at least I assumed so at that point. Creatures looking for me from beyond the tree, but down on all fours. I need to convey the fear I was feeling at this moment, Jeff. I realized that more than likely I was out in this valley alone with possibly 3 Dogman, and I was armed with a bolt-action rifle. The Dogman was at least 100 yards from me. So I continued walking, continually looking behind me to see if it was coming after me. Maybe 50 yards or so, I looked back and it was gone. I picked up my pace big time. I went another couple of 100 yards or so, and I could see the upslope of the other side of the valley, the one I had come down an hour or so earlier. Something told me to stop and look around for perspective. I'm about 150 yards from the upslope. I silently looked around behind me. To my right, I could see one of the 3 behind me at about 50 yards and approaching, but not directly at me. It hadn't occurred to me when I first saw it that it hadn't seen me. I assumed it was because I was partially obstructed from its view by the tree. I took 2 quick steps and got fully behind the tree, although with the backpack on, I am still only 3/4 covered. I leaned out from behind the tree to see what it was doing, and it had gotten within 20 yards of me, but was looking straight ahead in the direction I had been heading. He was to my right and ahead of me by a couple of yards. He was magnificent. He was a dark brown color with streaks of black, probably 7.5 feet tall, upright, with a short tail. He was not fully mature. In fact, I would later realize all 3 of them were young males. He did not look like a German Shepherd or a Belgian Malinois in the face. He looked more like a wolf with bigger head and bigger teeth. I looked all around me to see if the other 2 were present. If they were, I couldn't see them. It was no more than 20 yards from me. And when he stood up and smelled the air, he presented a perfect target. His head was huge, and when he lifted it up to smell the air, he made it even bigger. It would have been hard to miss him at 20 yards, so I took the shot. His head rocked to the right because the shot came from the left and he went down. When I walked over to him, I noticed he wasn't quite dead. He was making some weird gurgling noises and still moving his arms. Not wanting him to suffer needlessly, I worked the bolt of the 03, took 2 steps behind him, out of reach of his flailing arms, and fired the kill shot into the head, 6 to 7 feet away. He stopped moving immediately. I thought briefly about pulling out my phone and grabbing some pictures, but every fiber in my being said don't. My instincts were right. As I turned from the way I was coming, I saw his 2 friends, less than 50 yards away, and closing in slow but steadily. Their heads were low, and their yellow eyes were incredibly and undeniably focused on me. As I approached, I was unsure about what to do next. It occurred to me, if they both came at me full on, I would not be able to stop them both in time because of having to work the bolt between shots. So I decided not to fire at all and let them come. I swear to God, Jeff, I think that confused them because the longer I waited to fire, the slower they approached. I got to the point where they were both within 10 yards of me, and I kept swinging my rifle back and forth between them. It was like a standoff because when I would swing the rifle towards one of them, it would stop and the other would approach, and then would swing the rifle towards that one and the other would approach. This went on as I was backing away from them for over a minute. I finally backed into a tree, and they seemed to stop 7 to 8 yards from me. And it appeared to me that they were considering what to do next. At this moment, right at this moment, I heard a helicopter approaching from the west, flying extremely low. And when I say low, I do mean low. When it finally came into view, it was less than 500 feet from the ground. It seemed to scare the 2 young dogmen, and they looked up and started to back away. I used this time to quickly sing the 03 across my body, diagonally, and pulling out the 686 from my thigh rig as I moved toward the upslope. I never turned my back on those 2 creatures and kept the 357 trained on both of them as I moved away. The helicopter did not appear to see any of us, or at least it did not act like it did, and it came back for a second pass as I approached the upslope, and flew even lower over my position, not more than 300 feet off the deck. After the second pass, it seemed to fly off in the direction I was heading. I had gotten to the very spot I had been standing at when I first saw these creatures 90 minutes earlier. Once the helicopter had passed the second time, the 2 dogmen seemed to re-engage with me and began following me up the upslope. I had managed to put 80 to 100 yards between us, though, and I pulled out the other 357 and started walking as fast as I could back towards 89. The problem I had was that I was still about 5 miles from the highway, and not 1 but 2 dogmen were less than 100 yards behind me. There was no point of running. First, I can't run anywhere near 5 miles. Second, I couldn't really run even if I wanted to because the weight I was carrying. And third, these creatures weren't going to let me just run away. I was absolutely terrified because I knew I was going to have to use my wits, my guns, and my balls to negotiate my way back to the highway. I decided I would fire at them every time they got close. And this is what I did. As I walked as fast as I could, I would occasionally stop, turn, and face them. Each time they would get a little closer, and I would fire at them. This would push them back a few feet or so behind a tree, and then as I continued walking, they would begin following again. I was truly being stalked. To make no mistake, their intent was to kill me. This went on for nearly 90 minutes until I was within a half a mile or so of the highway. I had fired well over 50 rounds of 357 at them, and I do not believe I hit either of them even once. When I got about a half a mile from the highway, I stopped behind an abnormally large tree and put the revolvers away. I looked behind me, and they were both within 60 yards of me and closing in quickly. I had decided that the 30-06 would have a lot more stopping power, even if it meant I didn't have as many rounds available. What I had decided was to let them get close enough to try and kill one or both of them instead of just scaring them away with the revolvers. I must say, Jeff, the fear and terror had turned into anger and rage. I stepped out and aimed at the larger of the two, who by now was 30 yards away. And when he saw me standing there, with my rifle, he slid to a stop and tumbled head over heels. I fired and assumed I missed because I saw no blood or reaction from him. The other one had moved to my left, and it appeared to me he was trying to get between me and the highway. When I saw him move behind a tree, I turned and started jogging toward the highway as quick as I could. Once again, a helicopter, white with markings I could not read, flew low over the position coming from the direction of the highway. I saw the one I had fired at and ran in the direction away from me. The other one was nowhere to be seen, or so I thought. I walked an eighth of a mile or so toward the highway, and when I was about 3/10 of the mile or so to the road, I saw a flash of black or brown coming at me from my very direction. I had seen him run when he was trying to get behind me. It was only 15 yards or so from me when I turned to face it. He was on all fours, and I hit him in his left shoulder, causing him to tumble to his left away from me. He got up and limped away in the same direction his buddy had gone. I lifted up the rifle to finish him, but by the time I focused on him to get ready to fire, he was far enough away that he was not a threat anymore. The last sight I had of them was him running into the forest, limping and attempting to catch up to his buddy. I stopped, fell to my knees and then my ass, and let the rifle fall onto my lap. It was now approaching 4 p.m. in the afternoon, and I was exhausted, hungry, thirsty, adrenaline crashing, shaking like a scared old woman. I sat there for what must have been 5 minutes, occasionally glancing at where I had last seen this dogman enter the deeper forest. Fortunately, they were gone. When I was getting up and brushing off my ass, I noticed this guy approaching me from the highway. He was an average-looking guy, Caucasian, 6'1", with military-style haircut, about my age or slightly older. I slung the rifle over my shoulder and started walking toward him. The first thing he did, to my surprise, is say hi. "Was all that gunfire from you?" I said, "You know it was," as I continued walking by him. I knew he was some sort of government man. What else could he be? He said, "Can I talk with you for a minute? After all, we are cleaning up your mess." I stopped dead in my tracks and turned to face him. I said, "My mess?" He said, "Brad, we know exactly who you are and exactly what you've done." I said, "Then you know that I came out here to hike, and I haven't purposely disobeyed any warnings, especially the last." He said, "I know that's what I want to talk to you about. Follow me to my truck." We finished walking the last quarter of a mile to the highway, and he said, "Where's your car?" I said, "It's down the road a bit." I told my partner that Toyota way down in the road was yours. I said, "You probably ran my plate and knew for sure that it was my car." He said, "Actually, I didn't." As we approached his truck, which was parked on the other side of the highway, I noticed another guy sitting in the opened tailgate of this Ford pickup. As we crossed the road to get to his truck, I asked what was his name. He replied, Steve, and my partner is Darren. I nodded to Darren and got a nod back. I'm not even going to ask what agency you are from. And he said, good, because we couldn't tell you if we wanted to. I asked, what do you want from me? He said, you just need to listen closely to what I am about to tell you. I nodded and said, I'm listening. He said, you are the only person we have come across who has had as many encounters as you've had with these creatures and still to be in one piece. I said, I'm lucky. He said, it's more than that. Has it ever occurred to you that your odds of one person having so many encounters is a statistical impossibility? I said, it actually has occurred to me. He said, it's not random. Have you ever heard of how bloodhounds and other tracking dogs will be attracted to certain people and not others? I responded, yeah, I have. I started to say something else when he interrupted with me. It's almost like they are attracted to certain people more than others, but in a good way as it relates to tracking dogs. I said, you're not about to tell me these creatures are tracking me or following me home, are you? He said, don't be ridiculous. That's all bullshit about following people. I said, okay then, what are you saying? We've discovered that approximately 3 to 5% of the population have a particular scent that attracts them 10 times more than the other part of the population. I said, so obviously I am one of that part of that population. Is that what you're telling me? Not exactly. You have a probability of being in that 1%. I said, well, that explains a lot. Everybody in the paranormal community thinks I am a liar or at least an exaggerator. I followed with, I have done something to increase this scent thing, or is it just something I was born with? He said, no, it is natural from birth. You have had a lot of strange things happen in your life when you were outdoors in the woods. And I laughed. You mean besides 5 encounters with dogmen in 3 different states? He laughed, and so did his partner. Now that you mention it, I have had a lot of weird things happen to me in my life, both indoors and outdoors. It's been like that my whole life. He said, well, now you know why. As far as I know, there are only a handful of you in the entire country who have actually killed more than one of them and lived to talk about it. He went on, you've now killed 3. I interrupted before he could finish. I've only killed 2, he said. Trust me, you've killed 3. I knew he must be referring to the dogman that I wounded in Oklahoma. One of them that we thought had just been wounded must have died, but he didn't elaborate. He started to get into his truck, and his partner walked around the passenger side of the truck to get in, and I said, is that it? You came all this way out to tell me? No, there's one other thing. If I were you, I would stop going into the forest or any state or national parks altogether. It seems like the scent gets stronger as you get older, as you are less able to defend yourself. You're going to be 55, your next birthday, right? I nodded. He states, your luck will eventually run out, and it will happen when you least expect it. He went further. You do what you want, but I'm telling you, I would do what I would do, especially with the run of luck you've had. Why push it? I said, you're not going to make me sign an NDA or warn me not to tell anybody? They both laughed. Brad, most people don't believe you anyway. And a small group who do aren't a concern. You can tell who you want. You can even go on your buddy's show in New York if you want. I said, thanks for telling me this. I appreciate it. You needed to know before you get yourself killed. Now hop in the back of the truck and we'll drop you off to your car. I responded, no thanks, I'll walk. I need to decompress. He said, after that, anybody would. Take care, and pulled off. I waved as he pulled away. I walked a half mile or so to the car, put my gear in the truck, got in the trunk, got into the car, and was home an hour or so later. I've been thinking about it ever since, Jeff. They know who you are. They know who I am. It's freaky. But all of it's starting to make sense now. Like I said, I will never go into the woods or state or national parks again, period. And then, I hope to hear from you because this is the greatest, or at least one of the greatest Dogman stories I have ever been able to share. I hope we are still friends, because we hadn't talked in so long. This was not the experience that Brad was talking about the last time. Actually, in October. It was going to be October, right around Halloween. He had a Bigfoot experience. That's about all I'll say, because I don't know the whole thing. He never shared the whole thing with me. I just know he had a Bigfoot experience, and someone or something happened and to stumble upon him, and it messed it all up. It scared him. But he has been, like he said, putting a pack on and running in the woods, hiking, just to try and get into shape. I believe wholeheartedly the government knows who the majority of us are that are looking into these things. You know, they know that Politis is looking into them. They know that myself, Dark Waters, Vic Cundiff, Steve from How to Hunt, they're not dumb. They know. And but like he said, we are no issue for them. And that's why I think they allow us to speak about this stuff. Because like Brad said, you know, nobody believes me anyway. Like, yes, there are a lot of people that listen to my show, listen to James's show, Steve, Politis, Vic. But that number added all together is like a fraction of the population. And the majority of the population think we're nuts anyway. So we're no big deal for these people. Anyway, I am, like I said to Brad, I will get in touch with you. He wanted me to read this first. And yeah. It makes a lot of sense though. You know, you think about people that have had multiple encounters with these things. I only had one, but Brad's had multiple. Luke has had multiple. Luke's family and other people have had multiple encounters. And it makes sense that there is some sort of pheromone that we put off. Robert from North Carolina, former state trooper / sheriff there. His wife ended up taking her life after their experience. He's had multiple encounters. And I remember one time when he said I was so embarrassed. He was so embarrassed one encounter. He was older in this encounter. He was in his late 60s. But he had urinated on himself because he was so scared. Because this Dogman was the one that attacked his dogs, was incredibly demonic looking. And I said, you know, maybe that's not something to be ashamed of, bud. Maybe that's the way that, you know, like when a puppy gets scared, it pisses. Maybe that's a way of covering up a scent. You know, that urine smell covers up that fear pheromone. I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but it was just an idea. All right, let's jump into some case files. All right, these are the case files that we have been discussing, documented reptilian case files. And I got a couple. We're going in order. So we're at case file number 11. Case file 30, if you guys do remember, deals with Dulce. And there's 4 after that. So there's a total of 34 of these case files, which these were researched by people similar to the folks that wrote this book. Case file number 11, from On the Shores of the Endless Worlds, by Andrew Thomas. Even in this jet age, every Hindu is familiar with and usually believes in the legend of the Nagas, the serpents which live in extensive underground palaces in the rocky Himalayas. It is believed that these creatures are able to fly in space and that they possess amazing magical powers and intelligence. They are not fond of man if he is a curiosity seeker, explorer, or mountaineer. According to the sacred tradition of the Hindus, the deep caverns of the Nagas contain fabulous treasures, illuminated by flashing precious stones. The subterranean abodes are known to be in certain parts of both the Himalayas and Tibet, particularly around the lake of the Great Nagas, Lake Manasarovar. Andrew Thomas describes his own personal encounters with those who claim to have knowledge of these subterranean and space-traveling reptilian creatures. He states, I decided to go to the Kulu Valley in the western part of the Himalayas to visit Nagar, where Nicholas Roerich had lived. Since I had known him personally, the trip had sentimental overtone, a narrow carving road, a precipice on one side with rocks and avalanche on the other, were not conducive to the enjoyable journey to this remote region near Ladakh, Tibet. The village of Nagar derives its name from Naga, the serpent. High up in the mountains lies Roerich's estate. Having been an artist of note, his two-sided home contains a museum of his paintings. As I began my ascent on this mountain path, I saw a tall, gray-haired sadhu, or hermit, sitting by the mountain turret. In his hand he held a cobra-shaped staff, which, together with the markings on his forehead, signified that he was a devotee of Shiva. During the earlier, more peaceful times of the British Raj, these pilgrims would travel to the Lake of the Great Nagas, or Lake Manasarovar, or to the Mount Kailash and the abode of Shiva, a god apparently tied in with the Nagas. In Tibetan territory, I climbed the mountain and reached the terrace on which Roerich's house had been built. I spent an hour studying his paintings, and on the way back I admired the narrow valley and the looming snow-capped mountain ridges on both sides. The sadhu was still there, I thought, a place called Nagar, a devotee of the Nagas with the cobra staff. If he does know something about the Nagas, then if he doesn't know something about the Nagas, then who does? After Andrew Thomas asked this man, apparently a misguided member of the serpent cult, if he knew anything of the Nagas or the serpent beings, the pagan devotee responded, I am a poor sadhu. I know nothing. Sabib. But about 20 years ago, my yogi teacher went into the mountain kingdom of the Nagas, bright lights everywhere, big halls like the Taj Mahal. The Nagas have many, many things and machines. They are clever, like Cambridge men, maybe more clever. Sabib, the sadhu said with an apologetic smile. Your yogi must have been Rishi. Don't the Nagas destroy men with their string? I asked. Yes, though the Nagas are gods and wish nothing but good for men, they do not like men who have no business near their palaces, he replied. One can see here the poor misguided and indeed self-contradicting mentality of many of these souls who are caught up in the serpent cults throughout the world. In response to Thomas's accusations that the Nagas destroy men with their sting, this devotee agrees with him and states, yes, they do destroy human lives. However, he goes on to make that absolutely contradicting statement. The Nagas are gods and wish nothing but good to men. So, you make the call. Case file number 12. The Chupas, UFO Horror Stories from Brazil. An article by Antonio Hanus in the summer of '94 issue of UFO Universe. Mr. Hanus describes the following incident that was investigated by APEX, Association of Extraterrestrial Investigations. In São Paulo, one of the best-known UFO groups in Brazil, founded by a Dr. Max Brzozowski. The affair began near Zatora, the capital of state of the Espírito Santo north of Rio State, where there are beaches rich with mineral contents. It happened either in the late 79 or early 80. Schwartz wasn't sure when he told the story in 1986. A youngster called Aromar sold beverages at the beach, where one day he encountered 3 men dressed in suits and tie, highly unusual clothing for the beach, especially in Brazil, who approached him and said they wanted to talk with him. Aromar became scared, thinking that perhaps policemen who wanted to implicate him in a drug case, so he avoided the beach for a few days. As he returned home after dropping off his girlfriend one night, he saw a car with the same 3 men inside. He ran into his house, but suddenly he couldn't hear well. His mother took him to the hospital, where he was not cured, although about a month later he suddenly could hear well again. Aromar moved to Rio, finding work at a bakery in a shift between 4 and 11 p.m. One night, as he was crossing one of the many tunnels that link the Rio bays, he saw 2 of these men in black walking his direction. The youngster ran in the opposite direction, only to find the third waiting at a bus stop. He escaped and went back to the bakery, where he told his boss that the Vitória police were chasing him. The boss accompanied him to the nearest police station to make a complaint, which he did, but he was not believed. The boss then convinced him that he should perhaps move to São Paulo, a bigger city where it may be easier to go unnoticed. So Aromar moved to São Paulo, finding work in an electrical company and sharing a room with another man. He also became friends with a vendor of beverages from Vitória who had a stand near a movie theater. While hanging out there one night, a car stopped right in front of the stand and opened the door. Even though he didn't want to go, Aromar lost his will and entered the car, even though he did not want to go. The door closed and he found himself inside. Not surprisingly, the same 3 men who he had been dodging for months were in. They drove for a while, leaving the city and entering a wooded area. The car stopped and they all walked up to a large UFO surrounded by some sort of luminous ring and hovering above the ground. The men walked underneath the craft, which emitted a ray of light, and they were suddenly inside. Still drained from any willpower, Aromar walked to a chair and sat down. From the arms of the chair appeared handles that secured his wrists. An iron bar then pressed his forehead back while other gadgets fastened around his neck. Up to here, the men were always dressed in suits, but at this point, an incredible transformation took place. The Men in Black's head ripped open into a heart shape, and the skin became green and scaled like a reptilian. Take into account that while the popular image of Men in Black was well known 14 years ago, the idea of reptilian abductors was then not in vogue as it is nowadays. Be that as it may, so meaning this is an old experience when no one was talking about this stuff. Kind of like when I say my Dogman experience happened in 94 and I was talking about it in 94 to my friends. Be that as it may, the UFO nuts proceeded to interrogate him and tell him things that were going to happen both to him and the Earth. To make the story even more Hollywood-esque, a door in the room opened at that point, and Aramar was able to peek at human corpses hanging by their feet from hooks. The man naturally became traumatized, remembering only that his straps were loosened. Everything went blank after that. Aramar's conscious recollection places him next back at the theater, but several hours later, since there was no traffic in the streets, he returned to his room in a panic and began telling his story to the roommate. A strange force pushed his body, however, throwing it against the wall in front of him. As he remembered, the aliens had told him he should not speak about the experience or he would suffer. Aramar cried for a while, not knowing what to do. A few days later, his friend contacted the Globo TV network, which was working on a UFO documentary. Globo, in turn, passed the tip to Dr. Max Brzezowski. Aramar and his roommate went to Apex on a very busy day when the office was full. When they told their whole experience to Dr. Brzezowski and a few assistants, Osni Schwartz among them, Brzezowski attempted to do hypnotic regression with the witness, but there was too much interference in the office, and Aramar was in a total panic. He was saying that they were going to take him on the next Thursday and that the UFO was going to land in St. Paulo neighborhood on a Tuesday night. A crowd of people, in fact, went that night to the supposed landing, but nothing happened. Although Dr. Brzezowski was in touch with Aramar, he vanished a few days later and no one ever saw him again. Wow. That's crazy. Case file 13. This is from an undisclosed message board back in April 7th of 1999. So, like, early days of the internet. 7:55, 18 seconds, no name. Having been within arm's length of the reptilians, I did get to observe various details. They wore no clothes, but they did have a utility belt with several unusual things. One device had a small orange light on it. When this was touched, they simply disappear. I have quickly moved into spots where these reptilians were instantly after they disappeared. There was no temperature anomaly in that zone. I had expected it to be cooler in the area. If they were draining energy to manifest, like happens in various kinds of apparitions, they did not change density at times. They did change density at times, They made heavy footsteps in the hallway on wooden floors. They could walk through the walls. They glow an electrical blue-green color, like some kind of aurora. The head is similar to that of reptilian humanoids on the TV program Babylon 5. The head was more cone shape, like the Yeti would have.
In fact, the reptilians are built very much like a Bigfoot. The one has scales, the other has hair. The eyes are slit serpent-like, very strange, flame-like, and flickery. 3 fingers and an opposable thumb with claw-like talons on the fingers and feet. A small tail, large scales, like a breastplate on the chest. The scales were similar to that. Similar, body is flexible, like around the elbow. The scales were almost like a snake's. I guess that is why they call them the serpent race. The scales were mostly green and very dark green. On each scale, a variation of color. They are telepathic, very quick thoughts. Ideas driven by images and geometric impressions, not a linear form of communication like words, more of a symbol or image language. They do not react to our thoughts. They can overwhelm us with data. It seems like thought compression. It can take you a long time to assimilate to their transmission and interrogate it. After a while, I saw the language as fractal, mandalic, hyperspheres, or thought form constructs to pass data. These suck the data freaks, highly intellectual, limited emotional response, hate, fear, and short circuit, confusion state, mild panic. You can think or do the unexpected, and they do freak out. So stay calm and centered. They respect that. Then they think you are dangerous. But if you fear them, they will taunt your weakness and will disrespect you. Careful, do not disrespect them either, but disrep them either. They are no better than you. I glean they want something we have, something in our soul nature. We can shift to theta balance and link to a source. They are too far into analyzing. Unbalanced. They like drugs like cocaine, opium, magic mushrooms, and milking human for endorphins. They can't get into your mind without you having the opportunity to get into a reptilian brain as well. They know a lot more about outward form of creation than we know the force, but behind that is the source. They need us. We don't need them. They will appear in England to Tibet in August of 1999, then will return 13 years later in 2012. This is the 20th year since I saw them in 1979. They are here. I know I waited 10 years before. I originally went public. The reptilians are okay, but even they fear the returning Draco, or horned and winged ones. These are more reddish. The Draco Prime, or white albino Tal.
All right, folks, there you have it. I hope you all enjoyed this second bonus of the evening as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you for supporting the channel. After all, it is your support that helps the channel to continue to grow and go, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and our friends. These creatures are real. These events have happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.